Hello, this is the fourth part and the final part of the lecture series on Tuesdays with Morrie. I welcome you all to this lecture again. My name is Piyush Chaudhary, currently Assistant Professor at Hansraj College, University of Delhi. I heartily welcome you all to this lecture. In the previous lecture, I had discussed till the 10th Tuesday, and in this lecture today, I will go ahead with the remaining part of the book. I will also be discussing the various themes such as death, love, happiness, money, culture and several other themes. So, let me now take you to the 11th Tuesday. As you can see, this is the 11th Tuesday and here they talk about culture. As the name suggests, Morrie tells us about how culture works, how our society works and how our culture conditions us into acting in a particular manner. Perhaps I personally believe that no one could have told us this better than a professor of sociology himself, because that is what sociology teaches us. Sociology teaches us how our society shapes, how our society functions. Right. So, look at these lines to understand the largeness of heart and the largeness of the intellectual capacity of Professor Morrie Schwartz, and I will show it to you on the screen now. People are only mean, he says, when they are threatened, and that is what our culture does, that is what our economy does. Even people who have jobs in our economy are threatened because they worry about losing them, and when you get threatened, you start looking out only for yourself, you start making money a god. It is all part of this culture. So, what is he saying? He is saying that it is our culture which makes us mean, which makes us bad, because that is how the economy functions, that is how our everyday culture functions, right? Because it teaches us to be inherently evil, to be excessively competitive, and that is why we need to change our culture, and we need to give up the bad culture and accept a culture of service, you can say brotherhood, humanity, and service to the nation, right. So, basically Professor Schwartz is saying to not believe in the culture which makes you feel bad about yourself, or which makes you overly competitive, or which degrades you. So, he is saying that one has to be slightly non-conformist, and one must not settle for less, and must be wise enough to accept and follow their own culture and reject bad cultures which make you feel small about yourself, right. So, a very vital important lesson that we have just now understood about culture. Let me now take you to the next chapter, and that is the audio visual, and this is part number 3. So, as the name itself suggests, this is once again the third meeting of Ted Koppel, the interviewer, with Professor Morrie Schwartz, and Mitch knows that this will perhaps be the last interview, because perhaps now Professor Morrie Schwartz will not survive the next visit by the television crew. He even notices that Ted calls Professor Schwartz as his friend, which shows that Morrie has a tendency to bring out compassion and love from everyone, even from someone who is doing business with Professor Schwartz. Such is the humane and the lively personality of Morrie, who even on his deathbed can actually touch souls, right. So, finally towards the end of their television interview, Professor Morrie gives his ultimate lesson, his one lesson that you can say it's the ultimate lesson, and that is to be compassionate and take responsibilities for other humans. And then finally he says that this disease will kill his body, but it will never touch his soul, it will never touch his spirit, right. And this is absolutely true of the character of Professor Morrie Schwartz. His body can be killed, his body can be destroyed, it is already destroyed now, but his spirit will live on forever through this particular book that we are reading, right. Now, let me take you to the 12th Tuesday, and on this Tuesday the topic of their discussion is forgiveness. On this Tuesday, Morrie tells that one should not keep vengeance or stubbornness or hatred towards other, because pride and vanity will anyway not help anyone achieve anything. At the same time, he also says that apart from forgiving others, we also need to forgive ourselves. We can forgive others, but what about ourselves? So, basically Schwartz says that one should not be too harsh on ourselves. We should not be too harsh on ourselves. We should not judge ourselves too much. Sometimes we people do that. So, according to Schwartz, we as humans sometimes can be very harsh on ourselves, and sometimes we do not forgive ourselves for our mistakes, right, or for anything that we did. So, according to him, this holds us back, and we should not have any regrets, that we should not be very harsh on ourselves, and we should also learn to forgive ourselves. So, the lesson on forgiveness is not just for other people, but it is also for our own selves. A very important chapter, okay, the 12th Tuesday. Let me now take you to the 13th Tuesday, and the 13th Tuesday they talk about the perfect day. What makes a perfect day? So the student Mitch asks his professor that if you get 124 hours in perfectly healthy condition once again, then what will you do in the last 24 hours? And look at the answer. This answer will surprise you. Look at what Professor Schwartz says. He says that I would get up in the morning, do my exercises, have a lovely breakfast, then have my friends for a lunch, then I'd go out for a walk in the garden with some trees, watch their colors, watch the birds, then we'd dance for the rest of the night, and I'll have a wonderful dance with many people until I was exhausted, and then I'd go home and have a deep, wonderful sleep. And look at what Mitch says. Mitch says that that's it, that's all that you need, and he says yes, that's it. It was so simple, so average. I was actually a little disappointed. Here I refers to Mitch Albom. I figured that he'd fly to Italy or have lunch with the president. After all these months lying here unable to move a leg or a foot, how could he find perfection in such an average day? Then I realized that this was the whole point. So if you notice closely, what is the perfect day according to Morrie? The perfect day according to Morrie is the average day. Therefore, what this essentially means, that each and every day that we are living, each and every moment that we are living should be our ideal day. It should be our perfect day. It should be the day that we enjoy the most. So there is nothing special in the average day that Professor Schwartz wanted to live. His average day included his breakfast, his tea, his swimming, and because he loved dancing, so dancing, going for a walk, looking at the birds, coming home to eat his favorite dish, have some good food and then go for a deep sleep. So the readers would notice that there is nothing flamboyant, nothing special, nothing different, nothing significant in this particular day. This is because Professor Morrie Schwartz's philosophy of life is that the perfect day is the one which is an average day, which is an everyday day, right? So this is the larger lesson that he wants us to take from his life. So therefore, by saying so, he wants us to enjoy each and every day of our life as if we are living the best day of our life, right? So after this highly insightful discussion, they finally discuss about Peter. Peter, as we all know, is the younger brother. In the previous third part, I have discussed about Peter and how he had cancer, and now he has distanced himself living in Spain. And Mitch Albom, the author, is not able to get back to his his younger brother Peter. So Professor Schwartz says that maybe Peter is so disturbed and so broken by the cancer incident that he is not able to take the burden of being in close relation with the people, and that he should let him go and he should let time take its own course, right? So this is the advice that Professor Schwartz gives to his students. Now comes the final Tuesday, the 14th Tuesday, and the 14th Tuesday they both say goodbye. As we all know, this is the final Tuesday, and at the end of this Tuesday, Professor Schwartz will die. And he tells, in this Tuesday, he tells that a fully grown up man of an average height like Professor Schwartz now looks shorter than a child. Why? Because because of the disease ALS. So Mitch begins to cry, seeing that perhaps this is the last time that he is meeting his professor and he might not survive another week. So seeing this, Professor Schwartz raised his eyebrows as if he was really happy that he finally made him cry. If you remember, in several of the previous lectures that I took, I told you that Professor Morrie is of such a jovial nature, and he wanted to make sure that his student cries, because Mitch was a stoic person. He didn't show emotions. Mitch wanted to cry. Mitch was an emotional person, but he was ashamed of showing his emotions. And Professor Morrie said that someday or the other I will finally make you cry. So when he finally cries, so Professor Morrie Schwartz raises his eyebrows as if it's his final victory, and he finally was happy that he was able to make his student cry. And also not just happy because he cried, but rather because he is now willing to show his emotions. Throughout the book, throughout the 13 Tuesdays, he did not show much emotions. But now in the 14th Tuesday, he finally showed emotions, right? And then they finally depart. So that is the end of the 14 Tuesdays. Let me now take you to the next topic, and the name of the topic is graduation. So right in the very beginning, we are informed in this chapter that Morrie died on a Saturday morning, and he died alone in his room when no one was around. And then the cremation day took place, and surprisingly it was a Tuesday again. So this sequence of Tuesdays, as you can see, has come a full circle in the life of the teacher and the student. Now comes the next and the final most chapter of the book, which is titled The Conclusion. It's the conclusion. So here Mitch tells that one lesson that he learned from his professor was that there is no such thing as too late in life. So finally he talks to his brother, he goes back to his brother and he writes him a letter respecting the fact, he respected the fact that he does not want to talk, but he still requests that, and he says that he loves his brother and he would want to stay in touch with him, and he will accept whatever decision the younger brother Peter will take. Surprisingly, after some days he receives a letter on his fax machine, and this is the message that he gets from his younger brother Peter. As you can see, his younger brother writes him finally back. He says, I have joined the 90s, it began. This is the 1990s, by the way. He wrote a few little stories, what he'd been doing that week. And by the way, now he's writing a few stories about his life, a couple of jokes. And at the end, he signed off this way, I have heartburn and diarrhea at the moment. Can we chat later? So you see, finally, his younger brother is writing some long letters. Finally, he is also opening us. He is also opening up. So therefore, there was just one major trouble in the life of Mitch Albom, and that was his troubled relationship with his brother Peter. But in the end, this relationship is now getting saved. Why? Because of Professor Morrie Schwartz, because of what he taught to Mitch. And it was the student who learnt all these ideas from his professor, and he applied those ideas in his life. He applied all his wisdom which Professor Morrie Schwartz gave him, and he finally succeeded in rebuilding and restarting at least a meaningful relationship with his younger brother Peter. So therefore, like a perfect teacher, at the end Professor Schwartz saved Mitch Albom. The book ends here. So this brings us to the end of this book, this long conversation between a fabulous professor, a fabulous teacher, and indeed a fabulous student, Mitch Albom. It is a conversation, a dialogue which has the power to change lives. The book ends, but the learnings and the teachings do not end here, right? So now I'll take you to some capsule-sized discussions on some of the major themes of the book. So we are done with the the entire book. We have covered all the various Tuesdays. We have also critically analyzed each and every aspect that is important for readers to understand and take home these values, right? So now I'll take you to the first theme. The first theme is the theme of love, and you can see on the screen right now, on the left you have Professor Morrie, and on the right in a pink polo shirt t-shirt you have the author Mitch Albom. It's a real picture, it's a real photograph which I just now showed to you, right? So amongst all the themes that the book carries, Professor Morrie Schwartz believed most firmly in the theme of love, and this is the first theme, that is love, and he believed that it is love which gives meaning to life. But his love is equivalent to freedom. His love is emancipatory. So we get to know that in the book when he tells his student Mitch that he never wants his children to keep revolving around him just because he is going to die. This is a very emancipatory form of love, because he doesn't want the world to stop, and he doesn't want them to just give attention to him just because he is suffering from a terminal illness, because he knows that his own children have their own life and that they should not make their father, Professor Schwartz, as the center of their lives. So this shows the highly, what you can say, philosophic and also freedom oriented ideology of love that Professor Schwartz carries. Also, Schwartz is of the firm opinion that money can never buy you love, no matter how much the world, how much the culture tells you, how much social media tells you. Money can never buy you love and peace. Very often throughout the book, if you remember, in the book he used to quote this very famous line from W.H. Auden's poem, we must love another, we must love each other or perish. This is the line that he keeps repeating, we must love each other or we should perish. So throughout his life he often quoted these lines in front of his student Mitch, right? And it's very important to understand, this is the theme of love, and this is the perspective of love, on love, by Professor Morrie Schwartz. So I'll take you to the next theme, and that is the theme of family. It's a very important theme again. So another very important thing related to the theme of love also, it's domestic life, marriage and family. These can be clubbed together more or less. So this is a theme which is very closely related to the first theme, and he believes that family is much more important than any material success, because ultimately your family is gonna stick around with you. So therefore on the theme of family, it is extremely important, and it is perhaps much more important than any other sort of material success or money. Let me now, since I just mentioned money, let me now go to the theme of money. So the next theme will be on money, a very vital theme, very important theme, right. So since I just now referred to money, let me discuss this theme. As I have already mentioned, his thoughts on money is that money can never buy you purpose of life. Money can never buy you happiness or peace. One of the examples through which he explains this is, if you remember in the previous lecture, in the third part, I also discussed how his early student days, when he just started working after his student life, he got a job at a mental hospital, at a mental asylum, and his first job in this mental asylum was where extremely high class elite people used to come for their mental health, right, because they were depressed. And then when he worked closely with the staff and with the rich patients, he got this very valuable lesson of his life, that no matter how rich you are, no matter how much wealth you have, be it generational or even if you develop that wealth on your own, you can never buy mental peace, right. This is because if money could have bought mental peace, then these rich people, these affluent people would never have had to go through any mental trauma, and they would never need to visit a mental asylum or a mental health hospital, right. So this is proof enough, this is proof enough of the fact that money cannot buy you mental peace, money cannot buy you happiness, isn't it, right. So it's a very important theme, money, that money cannot buy you everything. We all need to remember this. Let me now take you to the next theme, and that is, as you can see on the screen, it's the theme of culture. A very, very important theme, right, because according to Schwartz, the culture that we live in, this culture makes us feel ashamed of ourselves. The culture that we live in makes us feel small, it makes us overly competitive, right, it gives us insecurities. The social media, the popular culture, Facebook, Instagram, nowadays Instagram is very popular. The media, the social media, the internet, these are all different aspects of our culture, and these aspects of our culture, they create a bad impression on us, because then knowingly or unknowingly we start comparing ourselves with others. So one of the sharpest critiques by Professor Morrie Schwartz is aimed at culture, the culture that we live in. He even encourages Mitch to question the values that dominate our society. What are the values that dominate our society? They are mostly money, success, good looks, aesthetics, big cars, property, wealth, status, speed, productivity, right. So Morrie believes that these values are more or less empty, because they ultimately lead to dissatisfaction, right. A very, very important life lesson that he is giving us. Now once again, what I will do is I will show it to you on the screen, some of his other ideas about culture. And as you can see now, the culture we have does not make people feel good about themselves, he says, and you have to be strong enough to say that if the culture does not work, do not buy it. So the life lesson from this slide that you just now saw on the screen, the life lesson that Morrie is trying to give us is basically to create our own culture. But what do we mean by creating our own culture? It basically means creating an individual's own set of values and not following what you can term as the dogmatic values, and not following the herd, right. So he very emphatically wants and advises the readers to follow and to make their own culture, and not to follow the culture which is being imposed on them. This is because the culture which is being imposed on them, on us, makes us feel little about ourselves, makes us feel ashamed of ourselves. It can make us feel ashamed of our body, of our status. It can make us feel ashamed of of our age, of our money, of the amount of money that we have, of our age, of our looks, and so on and so forth. So, Professor Schwartz urges Mitch, and through this he urges all the viewers who are watching this lecture to not buy this culture and rather to make their own culture. So, his idea of creating one's own culture is basically his attempt to deconstruct and destroy societal constructs. Those societal constructs, only those societal constructs which make us feel small about ourselves, right. So, very important theme, and that is the theme of culture. Let me now take you to the next theme, and that is the theme of death. And in this picture you can see again, Professor Morrie Schwartz is lying down and his student Mitch. This is again a real photograph that you are seeing right now. It's a real photograph, when Mitch used to go every now and then, every Tuesday, to visit his professor, right. So, this is a real photograph that you just now saw. So, let me now very briefly touch upon the theme of death. The theme of death is an all-pervading theme. It's a theme which is present since the opening lines of the book. In fact, one single theme which binds the whole book is the idea of death. It is death which is central to the entire book. It is in the initial pages when Professor Schwartz got to know of his terminal disease, and when he got to know that he will die in just a few months, his initial reaction was of shock, but very soon he realizes that after his death no one is going to stop, the world is not going to stop, and therefore he should not be afraid of death. Rather than avoiding this serious subject like many of us can do, which we shouldn't, Morrie leans into it. He talks openly about dying, he talks jokingly about it at times. So, therefore, it's a mind of a, it's the mark of a strength of the mind and the strength of the character of Professor Morrie Schwartz, where he knows that every other day that he is living, he is getting more closer to death, and still he is not afraid of accepting it, and he is not afraid of it. So, Morrie's his acceptance of death is what you can say, it's not fatalistic, it's rather freeing. So, in the previous lectures I also discussed that his views on death are also life-giving. It's a paradoxical statement that I am making, but that is what it is. His views on death are also life-giving. So, in a way, this is suggesting that Professor Schwartz treated death as a natural part of his life, and he was able to detach himself from the horrific feelings of death and the grief of death, right. So, one of the most, if you remember, in the previous lecture I also discussed one of the most powerful quotes that Professor Schwartz kept repeating throughout the book is, if you remember, he says that once you learn how to live, once you learn how to die, you learn how to live. It's a very interesting quote, and this philosophy of Schwartz is a major message that he is giving and a major moral learning that he is giving to all the readers of the book Tuesdays with Morrie. So, these were some of the major themes of the book. Now, I will be giving some final remarks on the book, and I will conclude the lecture with that. In the conclusion, I would say that this book, Tuesdays with Morrie, is basically talking about ideas which might not look very flamboyant, which might look very unique, which might not look very unique or attractive, but in reality they actually are, because this is the book Tuesdays with Morrie which will allow you to change your perspective towards your entire life. So, how we read the book, basically it depends on our own selves and what we are learning and what we are taking from it. So, in short, this book, like all valuable books, can help us change our perspective in life and can help us build a new perspective, which will ultimately allow us to live a better life, a much more peaceful life, a much more satisfying life than what we already have been living. The readers and viewers of this lecture will definitely notice that the book is not didactic in nature. It doesn't sound boring, it doesn't sound sermonizing, it's not a didactic literature or a series of do's and don'ts. So, the tone throughout the text, the tone remains very interesting, and the readers are more or less hooked on till the last page. So, the book doesn't sound overly moralizing, right? It doesn't. Now, I will just show you the lines from a critic, and as you can see, this critic says, Yogita Chenani, she says, what makes this book exceptional is its refusal to be preachy. It doesn't offer a list of do's and don'ts. Instead, through heartwarming stories and real life experiences, it helps you to reflect on your journey and appreciate the complexities of life. So therefore, this book is basically a sort of a reflection rather than a series of rules and regulations and do's and don'ts. That's why the readers don't get bored. They are hooked on till the last page. This is the reason why this book has been so popular across the world, right? Also, the author Mitch has interspersed his own life and his own experiences to make the narrative even more smooth and to ensure that the book does not get reduced to a didactic, what you can say, preaching narrative. This is also one of the key strengths of the success of the book Tuesdays with Morrie. Of course, reading this book is at times difficult, and it can become at times too emotional for you. But at the end of the book, at the end of the day, when you complete this book, after learning the lessons from the 14 Tuesdays that Morrie imparts, it will help us to think about our emotions in a rational manner. Don't the readers think, don't you think that it will be a great victory in our lives if we are able to think about our emotions in a much more rational manner and to control them? So we can learn all of this from the book Tuesdays with Morrie. On this note, I will end the lecture, and now we come to the end of this 4-part lecture series on Tuesdays with Morrie. And I heartily thank you all for being with me throughout this journey. Do comment and share your views below so that we may indulge in such discussions and these discussions that we have learnt from the book Tuesdays with Morrie. I hope these 4-part lectures were able to add some sense and some value for the viewers. Hopefully, I will see you very soon on some other topic, on some other lecture, on some other day. Till then, keep watching CEC-UGC. Thank you and goodbye.